I walked back toward my apartment because I forgot to bring the special candles for Emma and David's celebration dinner. I moved quietly up the hallway, not wanting to disturb them while they set up decorations. Then I heard my daughter's voice coming from the living room. "I can't wait for the old woman to die," she said. My feet stopped moving. I thought maybe I heard wrong. David laughed, that nice laugh I always enjoyed hearing, but now it sounded mean and scary. "Only after she gives us the money for the $200,000 she promised for our apartment," he finished, sounding like he didn't care at all. I stood there frozen. I smiled a little smile, closed the door very softly, and walked back down the hall like nothing happened. Their party was in 2 days. I already knew what I would say when everyone raised their glasses. Just 2 months before, my life felt perfect and happy. After my husband died, I got a job helping at the community center 3 days each week. I taught kids how to read and helped them with schoolwork. My small apartment always looked nice with flowers everywhere and pictures of my family on the walls. Every Sunday, I made big dinners for Emma and David. They loved my cooking so much. I thought I was the best mom anyone could ask for. I was so wrong about everything. Emma was my whole world. When I lost my husband 10 years ago, she was 25 and just finished school. She had so many dreams and plans for her future. I sold our big house where we lived together, took all the money we saved, and bought this small apartment in the city. I thought it would help her start her grown-up life. "Mom, you don't need to do this for me," she told me many times. But I wanted to help her. I wanted to give her everything her dad, and I never could before. I just wanted my daughter to smile and be happy. When she met David 5 years ago, I felt so relieved. I thought she found the perfect person to marry. He was tall and always dressed nicely, with a big smile that made everyone like him. He worked at a bank, or that's what he told us. He always had interesting things to talk about during family dinners. "Margaret," he would say to me in his smooth, nice voice, "you are so amazing to us all. The way you raised Emma and kept this family together after losing her husband is wonderful." Those words made me feel so warm inside. Finally, someone noticed all the hard work I did. The wedding day was small but very beautiful. I paid for everything, naturally. Emma's pretty white dress, all the flowers, the hall where we had the party, and food for 60 people. David said he had no family nearby. He told us his mom and dad died in a car crash years ago. That made me feel even more sorry for him. I thought I could be the mother he lost when he was young. During the wedding, when I watched them promise to love each other, I cried happy tears. My little girl found someone to love her. At least that's what I believed was true. The first few years after they got married seemed wonderful from what I could see. They came to my place for lunch every Sunday, without fail. They shared their plans about traveling to new places, having babies someday, and growing old together. David always asked questions about my health, my money, and the papers for my apartment. "Margaret, it's really important to keep your papers organized," he said, acting worried about me. "A woman your age should have everything written down properly." I thought he was being kind and caring about my future. Now I understand he wanted something completely different. 6 months ago, David started telling me to put my apartment in Emma's name. "It's to keep you safe," he kept saying during dinner. "If something bad happens to you, Emma will have to deal with messy legal stuff. Plus, you don't need to worry about these things anymore. We can handle everything for you." Emma always nodded her head when he spoke, but something in her eyes looked strange to me. A coldness that wasn't there before. A distance I thought was normal for people who just got married. "Mom, David is right about this," she would say without much feeling in her voice. "It would be easier for everyone this way." But I said no every time. Not because I didn't trust them, but because that apartment was my safety and my freedom. It was the last thing I had from the life I built with my husband. "Let me think about it more," I always told them. David would smile, but his eyes didn't smile back at me. Looking back at that look now makes my skin feel cold and tingly. That night, after hearing those terrible words, I couldn't fall asleep at all. I lay in my bed, staring up at the ceiling, thinking about every conversation, every action, every weird moment I ignored during the past few months. The way David always changed what we talked about when I asked about his job. How Emma stopped sharing her private thoughts with me like she used to do. The quick looks they gave each other when they thought I wasn't watching. Everything was starting to make sense in my head. And that sense made my stomach hurt and feel sick. I woke up early and made coffee just like I do every single morning. I watered all my plants, cleaned the kitchen, and made the couch cushions look puffy and neat. I tried to do my normal routine to stop myself from feeling crazy inside. But every single thing I did reminded me of my own daughter's words. The old woman. That's what she called me. After everything I sacrificed and did for her, after all the times I went without things so she could have what she needed, I was just the old woman who needed to die so they could get the money. $200,000. That was how much I was worth to them. When Emma called me that morning to check about the anniversary dinner, her voice sounded normal and even sweet. Mom, is everything ready? David is so excited about the party. It took all my strength to sound cheerful like she expected. Of course, sweetheart. Everything is perfect for you both. But while I talked, I looked at myself in the mirror hanging in the hall. 65 years old, gray hair but well-kept and neat, wrinkles on my face that showed a life of hard work and worry. Did I really look that old and useless to them? I remembered the day Emma was born like it was yesterday. The labor was difficult and painful, and the doctors said I couldn't have any more babies after her. But I didn't care about that at all. She was perfect and beautiful, with those curious little eyes and tiny hands that held onto my finger like she knew I was her whole world. Her father, and I loved her more than anything. We gave her everything we possibly could. Maybe we gave her too much. Maybe we spoiled her so badly that she never learned to appreciate what she had or understand the value of hard work. During her teenage years, when she became rebellious and distant like teenagers often do, her father used to tell me, "Margaret, sometimes kids don't understand what their parents do for them until they have kids of their own." I waited and waited for that moment to arrive. I waited for the day Emma would grow up and understand everything we did to make her life good. But the years passed by. She got married to David. And that moment never came. Instead, this terrible thing happened. My own daughter, wishing I would die. David came into our lives acting like a prince from a fairy tale. I remember the first time Emma brought him to meet me. We were at the corner bakery, that little place we had been going to since she was just a small girl. "Mom, I want you to meet someone really special," she said with that bright smile I hadn't seen on her face in such a long time. David arrived carrying a bunch of yellow flowers. Not for Emma, but for me. "For the most important woman in the life of the most important woman in my life," he said in a charming way. He won my heart completely. He was thoughtful, polite, and always had time to listen to my stories about the old days. He asked about my work at the community center, about my plants, and about my favorite recipes I liked to cook. "Margaret," he would say, "you have wisdom that only comes from living many years and experiencing life. I hope someday I can be half as strong as you are." What a skilled liar he turned out to be. His acting was perfect and flawless. I was hungry for love and attention after years of being alone, so I fell into his trap like a silly young girl. The first few months of their relationship were beautiful to watch unfold. David treated Emma like a princess from a storybook, always doing romantic things and taking her to fancy restaurants that I knew they couldn't afford on a salary. When I asked Emma how they could pay for such expensive things, she just shrugged her shoulders. "David is really smart with money, Mom. You should see how he makes every dollar work." Now I understand it was my money he was counting and spending, the monthly checks I gave them to help them get started in life, the loans they borrowed and never paid back to me. It was after the wedding that the constant questions about my money started appearing. At first, they were small and not obvious. Margaret, do you have a will written down? It's important for your peace of mind to have one. Then they became more direct and pushy. Have you thought about investing the apartment? We could help you make more money from it. And finally, the nonstop pressure to put everything in Emma's name. It's for your own safety, Mom. My daughter would insist over and over. We'll take care of all the hard stuff. You've worked enough in your life already. There were warning signs I should have noticed and paid attention to. The way David got tense and nervous whenever I mentioned wanting to travel or buy something nice for myself. How Emma stopped asking for my advice and started treating me like I was a heavy burden. The times I would show up for a visit without calling first and find them talking in quiet, hushed voices. Conversations that stopped suddenly and immediately when I walked into the room. We were just talking about work, Mom, Emma would say with a fake smile painted on her face. But there was something in her eyes. A guilt that I now recognize perfectly and clearly. On my 65th birthday, they threw a small party for me at their place. David brought a vanilla cake, my favorite kind, and Emma gave me a soft, silky bathrobe in a pale pink color. So you can be comfortable at home, she said as she handed it to me. At the time, I thought it was a thoughtful and sweet gift. But now I understand the hidden message behind it. Stay home, old woman. Don't go anywhere. Don't live your life. Just wait quietly for your turn to die. They gave me gifts for an old lady who should be happy sitting still while waiting for the end to come. That night, after they left my apartment, I sat in my living room looking at all the family photos on the wall. My husband on our honeymoon, looking so young and handsome in his suit. Emma at her school graduation, proud and full of hope for the future. David and Emma on their wedding day, both smiling with what seemed like real happiness. At what exact point did everything go so terribly wrong? At what moment did I change from a loved mother into an obstacle blocking their path? But there's something they don't know about me. There's a secret I've been keeping for all these years. Something that could change this entire story completely and totally. My husband wasn't just a regular worker like I always told him he was. He had investments, properties in different cities, and bank accounts that even Emma doesn't know exist. I am not just a widow with a small apartment worth some money. I am so much more than they could ever imagine or guess. And if they want to play dirty games with me, they're about to discover that this old woman still has a few cards left to play in this game. The next day, I decided to act like nothing had happened at all. I woke up early, dressed in my favorite blue blouse and gray skirt, fixed my hair carefully, and put on makeup like always. If they were going to play a game with me, I had to be smarter and more clever than them. I called Emma to ask if she needed help with the anniversary preparations and decorations. Don't worry about it, Mom. David and I have everything under control, she answered in that sweet voice I now knew was completely fake and phony. Just come over tomorrow at 7 like we planned together. I hung up the phone and stared at it for several long minutes. I felt the anger mix and swirl with a deep sadness that hurt in my chest. I decided to go to the bank that morning. I needed to check my accounts, look at the apartment papers, and make sure everything was in perfect order. Robert, the bank manager who had known my husband for many years, greeted me with his usual friendly smile. Mrs. Margaret, what a nice surprise to see you. How is your family doing? The question hurt more than I expected it would. Fine, Robert. Everyone's just fine. I lied as I sat down at his desk. I need to look at my account statements from the past 6 months. And I also want to check who has permission to access my accounts. Robert's eyebrows came together slightly as he typed on his computer. Of course, ma'am. Let me pull that up for you. He paused, looking at the screen with a worried look on his face. What is it, Robert? I asked, feeling my heart start to beat faster and harder. Well, I see here that 3 weeks ago, someone came in asking questions about you. A young man who said he was your son-in-law. He wanted information about your accounts, but naturally we didn't give him any private data. We simply told him he would need you to come in person or bring official legal papers signed by a notary. My stomach felt like it was turning upside down. David had been digging into my private finances behind my back. Do you remember what else he asked about? Robert nodded, looking at some notes on his computer screen. He asked specifically about the value of your apartment, whether there was still money owed on it, and if you had other properties or investments anywhere. He seemed very interested to know if you had a will written or if you named who gets your money after you die. I sat quietly for a moment, letting all the information sink into my brain. My own son-in-law had been planning my financial funeral while I was cooking dinner for him every single Sunday. Robert, I said in a strong, firm voice, I want to make some changes to my accounts right now. And I need everything to be documented very carefully and clearly. We spent the next hour completely reorganizing my finances in a brand new way. I changed all my passwords, set up new security codes, and asked that any questions about my accounts be reported directly to me immediately. I also asked for copies of all my documents and account statements from the past 2 years. I had a strong feeling I was going to need them very soon. I left the bank with a folder stuffed full of papers and a determination I hadn't felt in many years. I went straight to the insurance office where David supposedly worked every day. It was a modern building downtown with large glass windows and a fancy reception area. "Excuse me," I said to the young woman at the front desk. "Could I please speak with David Thompson? I'm his mother-in-law, and I wanted to surprise him with a visit." The girl looked at me with a confused, puzzled expression on her face. "David Thompson? We don't have any workers with that name, ma'am. Are you sure he works at this location?" I felt like someone had punched me hard in the stomach. "Are you absolutely certain about that?" I insisted, showing her a photo of David on my phone. She called her boss, an older woman who looked at the picture very carefully.
"No, ma'am.
This man has never worked here at any time, and we keep very detailed records of all our current workers and everyone who used to work here." I apologized politely and left the building with my legs shaking and trembling. If David didn't work where he said he did, where was he getting money for all those expensive restaurants and costly gifts? I walked slowly to the corner bakery where Emma and I used to go when she was just a little girl. I needed to sit down, to think clearly, and to process everything I was discovering about my life. I ordered a cup of herbal tea and sat by the window, watching people walk by on the street. Families with small children, young couples holding hands tightly, elderly people walking slowly, but with clear purpose and direction. When exactly had I become one of those vulnerable old women that bad people take advantage of and steal from? I remembered a conversation we had 2 months ago, very clearly. We were eating dinner at my apartment, and David casually mentioned he had met a lawyer who writes wills for people. "Margaret, I made you an appointment with an excellent lawyer who handles estates and wills. It's really important to have your papers in order, especially at your age." Emma had nodded her head enthusiastically in agreement. "Yes, Mom. David is absolutely right about this. We can go with you, so you don't have to deal with all those complicated legal words you won't understand." At the time, I thought it was them being considerate and caring. Now I understood clearly they wanted to be there to influence and control my decisions. I also remembered how they had insisted I stop working at the community center, where I help children learn to read. "Mom, you've worked hard enough in your life," Emma had said with pretend concern in her voice. "Enjoy being retired and not working. Relax and rest. We can help you financially if you need any money at all," Julian had added quickly. "Margaret, a woman your age shouldn't be worrying about schedules and responsibilities anymore. You should be resting and enjoying your final years." Your final years. Those exact words echoed and bounced around in my head with a dark, scary ring to them. But what hurt my heart the most was remembering all the times I had defended David when my friends said they had doubts about him. Patricia, my best friend of 30 years, had told me on several different occasions that something about my son-in-law didn't seem right or make sense. "Margaret, that man asks too many questions about your money. I don't like the way he looks at your apartment like he's measuring it up and calculating its worth." I always defended him and made excuses. "Patricia, David is a good man who genuinely cares about my well-being and safety. You're being too suspicious and untrusting for no good reason. Now, I understood that Patricia had seen clearly what I refused to let myself see. I finished drinking my tea and decided to call her right away. I needed to talk to someone I trusted completely, someone who really knew me as a person. Patricia, can we meet today? I need to tell you something very important. Her voice immediately sounded worried and concerned. Of course, Margaret. Are you okay? You sound strange and upset. We agreed to meet at her house that same afternoon. Patricia lived just a 10-minute walk from my apartment in a small but cozy house she got when her mother passed away. When I arrived at Patricia's house, she greeted me with that special look she always had when she knew something was bothering me. Tell me what's going on, Margaret. I've known you for way too many years not to know when you're worried about something. I sat on her comfortable, familiar sofa, surrounded by photos of her children and grandchildren on every wall, and told her absolutely everything. From the conversation I overheard by accident to my visit to the bank and the shocking discovery about David's fake job that didn't exist. Patricia listened without saying a word, but I watched her face get harder and angrier with each detail I shared. When I finished telling her everything, she let out a long, deep sigh. Margaret, this is much worse than I ever thought it could be. I always knew that man was no good, but this is an organized scam and fraud. She stood up from the couch and began pacing back and forth across the living room, which she always did when she was very upset and agitated. We have to act quickly and decisively. If they're planning something for the anniversary tomorrow, we absolutely cannot just stand by and do nothing. But what can I possibly do, Patricia? I asked, feeling for the first time in many days that I had someone on my side, an ally. I don't have concrete proof of anything actually illegal. I just know they're lying and waiting for me to die so they can cash in and get my money. Patricia stopped walking and stood directly in front of me, her eyes shining with strong determination. Margaret, you are not a helpless, powerless victim. You are an intelligent, smart woman who raised a daughter, who worked your entire life, who held a family together after becoming a widow. You are not going to let a couple of con artists and thieves steal what you worked so incredibly hard to achieve and earn. She was absolutely right about everything. For several days, I had felt like a pathetic, deceived old woman who was tricked and fooled. But I was so much more than that simple description. I was Margaret, the woman who had worked double shifts and extra hours to pay for Emma's college tuition and education. The woman who had faced becoming a widow without sinking into self-pity and depression. The woman who had built a dignified and successful life with her own 2 hands and hard work. And if David and Emma wanted to start a war with me, they were going to get exactly what they asked for. That night, I couldn't sleep even one single wink. I lay awake in my bed, staring up at the ceiling as my mind went over and replayed every detail of the last 5 years of my life. It was as if I had been looking at my entire life through a foggy, blurry window. And now, all of a sudden, everything was crystal clear and sharp. Every gesture I had interpreted and understood as love was actually manipulation and control. Every affectionate, sweet word hid a wicked, evil intention behind it. How had I been so blind and stupid? How had I not seen what was happening right under my own nose in front of my face? I remembered the first Christmas after the wedding very clearly. David had arrived with expensive, costly gifts for the whole family. A pearl necklace for me, a fancy watch for Emma, and imported wines from other countries for our dinner. How can you possibly afford all these things on your salary? I had asked with genuine curiosity and interest. He had laughed that charming, delightful laugh that now made me feel sick to my stomach. Margaret, I've been very careful and smart with my savings over the years. Besides, my family deserves only the best things in life. His family. At the time, I was deeply touched that he included me as part of his family circle. Now, I understood crystal clear that he saw me only as his source of income and money. I got up from bed and went to the kitchen to make myself some calming tea. While I waited for the water to heat up and boil, I opened the drawer where I kept all my important legal papers organized. The deed to my apartment, my will, my bank statements, and records. I carefully reviewed and examined each document, looking for any detail I might have missed or overlooked. It was right then that I found something that made my blood run ice cold through my veins. A copy of my will with pencil marks and annotations written in the margins. They weren't my annotations or my handwriting. With trembling, shaking hands, I recognized David's handwriting immediately. He had specifically marked and highlighted the parts about Emma's inheritance and had written numbers on the side as if he were calculating and adding up amounts. He had also underlined with heavy marks the part where I mentioned my $500,000 life insurance policy. When exactly had he gotten access to look at these private documents? When had he been in my home going through my personal papers without me realizing or noticing what he was doing? Then I remembered clearly. 3 months ago, when I had a terrible flu, Emma and David came over to take care of me when I was sick. I had been in bed with a very high fever for 2 full days, practically unconscious and unaware from all the strong medication I was taking. They had keys to my apartment for emergencies and safety. They had been coming and going freely, supposedly to bring me medicine and food to help me feel better. Now I understood with perfect clarity that they had taken advantage of my weak, vulnerable state to go through all my documents and papers systematically. They had been planning this entire scheme for many months. My phone suddenly buzzed and vibrated, startling me and making me jump. It was a text message from Emma. "Mom, I hope you're resting well and sleeping good. Tomorrow is going to be a very special day for David and me. I love you so much." I read the message over and over several times, trying to find any trace or hint of real sincerity in those typed words. Did she really and truly love me? Or could she no longer tell the difference between her real feelings and her acting performance? At what exact point had my own daughter become a complete stranger to me, someone I didn't know at all? I remembered with painful, sharp clarity the day she told me she was in love with David for the first time. She had that special light in her eyes that only appears when someone is truly, genuinely happy. "Mom, I think he's the one I want to marry," she had said as we drank coffee together in my kitchen. "He's so attentive and caring, so different from all the other men I've dated before." I had been so incredibly thrilled and excited to see her glowing and radiant after years of failed relationships that ended badly. Was that love she felt real and authentic? Or had David been manipulating and controlling her too from the very beginning of their relationship? But there was something about this that didn't add up or make sense. Emma wasn't naturally a greedy, selfish, or calculating person throughout her entire childhood and teenage years. She had been generous and kind, caring and empathetic, always concerned and worried about other people's feelings. I remembered how she would cry real tears when she saw injured animals lying on the street. How she would insist on giving spare change to the homeless people we met on the way to school. What had David done to her to transform and turn her into someone capable of wishing for her own mother's death? Maybe she was a victim in this situation too. Maybe David had manipulated her just as much as he had manipulated me, making her believe that I was an obstacle and barrier to their happiness. Expert manipulators and con artists know exactly how to isolate their victims from their loved ones. They know how to make people see their own family members as enemies blocking their path. Perhaps Emma truly believed deep down that I was being selfish for not handing over the apartment to them, that I was being an unnecessary burden weighing down their lives. But then I remembered her laugh very clearly. When David had made the comment about the $200,000, Emma had laughed out loud. It hadn't been an awkward, uncomfortable, or forced laugh. It was a genuine, real, complicit laugh. In that specific moment, she wasn't being manipulated or controlled. She was a willing participant and partner in the plan. And that realization and understanding hurt worse than anything else possibly could. I decided I needed more information and facts before the anniversary party. I couldn't confront them without solid, concrete proof of what they were doing. I called Robert at the bank first thing in the morning when they opened. "Robert, it's Margaret calling. I need you to do me a personal favor if you can. Can you investigate and find out if my son-in-law David Thompson has accounts at other banks or if he has any debts registered on his credit report?" Robert hesitated and paused for a moment. "Mrs. Margaret, that's confidential, private information that I can't just—" "Robert," I interrupted him firmly, "I believe I'm being defrauded and stolen from. I need to protect myself and my assets." An hour later, Robert called me back with information that confirmed my absolute worst suspicions and fears. David not only had no stable, steady job anywhere. He had over $100,000 in credit card debt and personal loans from multiple sources. He had been living a completely fictional, made-up life, financed entirely by my gifts and the monthly allowance I gave them to help out. Furthermore, and additionally, he had tried to take out a large loan using my apartment as collateral and security, but had been rejected and denied because he wasn't the legal owner of the property. "There's more troubling information, Mrs. Margaret," Robert continued, his voice sounding worried and concerned. "I found records showing that he has been asking questions at several other financial institutions about special loans for seniors and elderly people, specifically about reverse mortgages that let people borrow against their homes." A reverse mortgage. That meant he was planning to have me borrow money against my own apartment. Money that he and Emma could use and spend while I was still alive, but which would effectively and essentially make them the real owners of my home. I hung up the phone with my hands shaking and trembling with pure rage and anger. They didn't just want me to die as soon as possible. They wanted to strip me of everything I owned before that happened. They wanted me to live out my last remaining years in complete poverty while they enjoyed and spent my assets and money. The cruelty and meanness of that plan was so ruthless and heartless. It was hard for me to believe my own daughter was capable of such an evil thing. I called Patricia immediately and told her all the new revelations and discoveries. Her reaction was immediate and instant. "Margaret, you need to call the police right this second. This is fraud and theft. It's elder abuse and exploitation." "No," I interrupted her with a calmness that surprised even myself. "I don't have proof that they've actually committed a real crime yet that I can prove. And even if I did have that proof, I want to confront them face to face directly. I want them to know and understand that I'm not the helpless old woman they think I am." "But Margaret, it could be dangerous for you," Patricia warned. "If they're that desperate for your money, what makes you think they wouldn't be capable of hurting you physically or doing something even worse?" Patricia's question made me stop and think carefully. How far would David and Emma be willing to go to get what they wanted from me? Was it possible they were planning something more sinister and evil than simply waiting for my natural death to happen? I then remembered something strange and unusual that had happened just the previous week. I had found a bottle of my blood pressure pills nearly empty when I was absolutely sure I had just refilled it a few days before. When I asked Emma if she knew anything about it, she had told me that maybe I was taking extra pills by mistake and not remembering. At your age, Mom, it's completely normal for memory to slip and fail a little bit. At the time, I hadn't thought much about it or worried. But now that explanation sounded extremely suspicious and questionable. I also remembered feeling strangely drowsy and sleepy after some of the Sunday dinners at Emma and David's apartment. I always thought it was because of my age or because I had eaten too much food. But what if they were putting something in my food or drinks? What if they had already started trying to speed up and hasten my death in ways that would seem natural and normal to everyone else? Fear washed over me like a wave for the first time since I had discovered and overheard the conversation. It wasn't just fear for my money or my apartment anymore. It was genuine fear for my actual life and safety. If David was as ruthless and cruel as he seemed to be, and if Emma was completely and totally on his side in this, I could be in real, serious danger. But at the same time, I felt something stronger and more powerful than fear growing inside me. A steely, iron determination not to let them turn me into a victim and a casualty. That afternoon, I made a final decision about what I would do. I wasn't going to run away and hide. I wasn't going to avoid them. And I wasn't going to call the police just yet. I was going to the anniversary dinner exactly as planned. I was going to sit at that table with them. I was going to raise my glass high. And I was going to show David and Emma that they had completely and totally underestimated the woman they were dealing with. I had a plan forming in my mind, and tomorrow night I would set it in motion and action. On the morning of the anniversary, I woke up with a mental clarity and sharpness I hadn't felt in years. It was as if all the confusion and pain of the last few days had hardened and crystallized into a pure, cold determination. I dressed very carefully and deliberately, choosing my most elegant wine red dress, the one my husband always said made me look distinguished and important. I applied my makeup meticulously and precisely. I put on the diamond earrings that had belonged to my mother before she died. If I was going to face my enemies head-on, I would do it looking like the strong, powerful woman I truly was deep inside. Before leaving my apartment, I called my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, who had handled all my legal matters since I became a widow. Mr. Harrison, I need to see you urgently tomorrow morning. It's about my will and some irregularities I've discovered. His voice sounded concerned and worried. Of course, Mrs. Margaret. Is everything all right with you? I'll explain everything tomorrow in detail. I just want you to know that if anything happens to me, there are specific people who have been trying to manipulate my finances and steal from me. There's a silence on the other end of the phone. Ma'am, if you're in danger or trouble, we should. I'm fine, Mr. Harrison, but I need this on record just in case something happens. I arrived at Emma's house at exactly 7 o'clock like we had agreed. David opened the door with that perfect smile that no longer fooled me at all. Margaret, you look absolutely radiant tonight. He kissed me on the cheek with the same false affection as always. Thank you, David. I'm very excited to celebrate with you both. Emma appeared from the kitchen, beautiful in her gold-colored dress, but there was something tense and nervous in her expression when she looked at me. The table was set elegantly with candles burning, fresh flowers, and the porcelain dishes I had given them for their first married Christmas. Everything looked absolutely perfect, like a scene from a fancy magazine. Mom, sit here, Emma said, pointing to the seat of honor at the head of the table. Tonight, you're our special guest, and we want to honor you. I sat where she indicated, noticing how she and David exchanged a quick glance they pretended I didn't see or notice. During dinner, they kept the conversation light and lively and cheerful. They talked about their travel plans for the next year, about the improvements they wanted to make to their apartment, about how grateful they were to have me in their lives. Mom, I don't know what we'd do without you, Emma said in a syrupy, overly sweet voice. You're the pillar and foundation of our family. David nodded enthusiastically and vigorously. Your daughter is absolutely right, Margaret. You are a blessing to us both. Every word sounded more hollow and empty than the last one. I noticed they kept pouring me wine, refilling my glass every single time I took even a small sip. I also noticed that Emma barely touched her food on her plate, and that David discreetly checked his watch several times. There was an underlying tension in the air that they tried desperately to hide with forced chatter and overly bright smiles. Something was about to happen, and I had a strong feeling it wasn't going to be pleasant. "Well," David said suddenly, rising from his chair, "I think it's time for a toast to celebrate." He picked up his glass and looked directly into my eyes. "Margaret, first and foremost, Emma, and I want to thank you for everything you've done for us over the years. Your generosity, your love, your unconditional support. We have no words to express what it means to us." Emma stood up as well, glass in hand, but she avoided looking me in the eye directly. "In fact," David continued smoothly, "we wanted to take this special occasion to ask you for something very important." This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. As you know, we've been talking about the future, about the family's financial security, and we believe the time has come to formalize some changes that would be beneficial for everyone. Lily finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that could have been guilt or nervousness. "Mom," Emma said in a soft voice, "David and I have been thinking a lot about your well-being. Working at the community center, maintaining the apartment, dealing with all those responsibilities. We think it's too much for you at your age." David nodded gravely and seriously. "What your daughter means is that we'd like you to consider moving to a smaller place, more appropriate for someone your age. We would take over the current apartment, of course, so you wouldn't have to worry about the expenses or maintenance." I felt rage rising in my chest, but I kept my expression serene and calm. "A smaller place?" I asked in a controlled voice. "Are you referring to a nursing home for elderly people?" David quickly shook his head. "Oh no, Margaret. Nothing so drastic as that. Just a one-bedroom apartment, something cozy and easy to maintain and clean. We would visit you constantly and regularly, making sure you were comfortable and happy. And of course," Emma added quickly, "we would take care of all your expenses. You wouldn't have to worry about a single thing." "I see," I said slowly, savoring each word. "And I suppose you already have everything planned out. The new apartment, the legal papers, everything arranged." David smiled broadly, clearly relieved that I was taking the suggestions so well. "Well, yes, we've been looking into some options. There's a very nice assisted living facility just 20 minutes from here with nursing staff available 24 hours a day." Nursing staff. It was a nursing home, no matter how they tried to dress it up and make it sound nice. "And of course," Emma continued, "to make all of this possible, we would need you to transfer the current apartment into our names. It's just for legal purposes, so we can handle selling it and buying your new place." David pulled some papers from an envelope he had sitting on the sideboard. "In fact, we've already prepared all the documentation and forms. It just needs your signature, and everything will be settled and finalized." I stared at the papers without reaching out to touch them. "You prepared all the documentation without consulting me first?" Emma became flustered and defensive. "Well, Mom, we wanted to surprise you. We thought if you saw how well organized and planned we were, you'd feel more secure about the decision." "And what if I didn't want to move?" I asked, keeping my tone calm and even. "What would happen then?" David and Emma exchanged another look, this one more obvious and clear. "Mom," Emma said, her voice becoming firmer and harder, "you're 65 years old. You can't keep living alone indefinitely forever. It's dangerous. It's irresponsible and careless. And we can't rest easy knowing you could have an emergency with no one nearby to help you. Besides," David added, "frankly, Margaret, maintaining that apartment is very expensive. The expenses are eating through your savings faster than you realize or understand." "My savings," I repeated thoughtfully. "And how exactly do you know the state of my savings?" David flushed slightly. Well, it's obvious from your monthly expenses, the upkeep of the apartment, the times you went to the bank to ask questions about my accounts. I interrupted him calmly. The color drained completely from his face. I don't know what you're talking about, Margaret. David stammered nervously. I also wonder, I continued in the same serene voice, how you have money for all those expensive restaurants and costly gifts when you supposedly work at an insurance company that coincidentally has never had an employee named David Thompson. Emma turned pale white. Mom, what are you talking about? What do you mean? I'm talking about the fact that I've discovered some very interesting things about you both, I said. For example, I discovered that you have over $100,000 in debt. I stood slowly from my chair, my glass still in hand. I discovered that you've been planning this for months, going through my private documents when you thought I was too sick to notice what you were doing. David had gotten to his feet as well, and for the first time, I saw something dangerous and threatening in his eyes. Margaret, I think you're confused. Perhaps it's your age affecting your memory. My age hasn't confused me at all, I said firmly. What confused me was believing that you actually loved me. I looked directly at Emma, especially you, my daughter. I was confused into thinking that after everything I sacrificed for you, you would see me as something more than just an obstacle to your financial happiness. Emma started to cry, but I couldn't tell if they were tears of guilt or frustration at being caught. And now, I said, raising my glass high, it's my turn to make a toast. I raised my wine glass and looked at them both with a smile that I knew would make their skin crawl. I toast to discoveries, I said in a clear, firm voice. To discovering who the people who claim to love me really are. David had completely lost his elegant composure, and Emma was openly weeping and sobbing. But I didn't know if it was from remorse or from being caught red-handed. Mom, please let me explain, Emma pleaded, her voice choked with sobs. It's not what you think. David and I really do love you, but what? I cut her off sharply. But you also love my money? But you can't wait for me to die so you can enjoy it. David tried to intervene with his most persuasive voice. Margaret, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding here. We would never wish for my death. I finished the sentence for him. Except I heard you 3 days ago when I came back for the candles. I heard you perfectly clearly. I can't wait for the old woman to die, were the exact words of my dear daughter. And you, David, you very specifically mentioned the $200,000 you expect to collect. The silence that followed was deafening and heavy. Emma collapsed into her chair, covering her face with her hands. David, on the other hand, seemed to be weighing his options like a cornered animal looking desperately for an escape route. Margaret, he finally said, his voice stripped of its usual charm, you don't understand the pressure we've been under. The debts, the expenses, the necessity. Necessity. I repeated with disbelief. The necessity to lie to me for 5 years? The necessity to fake a job you don't have? The necessity to go through my private documents behind my back. I stepped closer to him and saw him instinctively flinch and step back. What you don't understand, David, is that I know exactly what kind of pressure you've been under. I know about your gambling debts. I know about your maxed out credit cards. I know about all the loans you've applied for using false information. Emma lifted her head, looking at me with red, swollen eyes. How do you know all of that? Because, unlike you two, I do have real contacts in important places. And because when a woman my age suspects she's being conned and tricked, she has the resources to investigate thoroughly. David was on his feet now, pacing nervously back and forth. All right, fine. Yes, I lied to both of you. Maybe we've had some financial problems, but that doesn't mean some problems. I cut him off with a bitter laugh. David, you're over $100,000 in debt. You've been living off my money for years, pretending to be something you're not. And worst of all, you've turned my own daughter into your accomplice. I looked at Emma with a mixture of pain and contempt. Do you know what hurts the most? It's not the money. It's that you lied to my face for so long. That you hugged me, that you told me you loved me, all while you were plotting to get rid of me. It's not like that, Emma suddenly shouted. jumping to her feet. I do love you, Mom, but David is right. You don't understand how hard it's been for us. The expenses, the pressures, the feeling that we can never have a life of our own as long as we depend on you. Her words were like slaps across my face. Depend on me? I said. I never asked you to depend on me. I gave you money because I wanted to help you, not because it was my obligation to support you for your entire adult lives. David moved toward Emma and put a hand on her shoulder, but she jerked away from his touch. For the first time, I saw a crack forming in their alliance. Emma? David said tensely. Don't say another word. This can be fixed. Fixed? I asked sarcastically. How do you plan to fix this, David? By convincing me to sign those papers to hand over my apartment? Or maybe by speeding up my death in a more direct way? The accusation left them both frozen in place. What do you mean by that? Emma asked, her voice trembling. I mean, I've been noticing strange things these past few months. My pills disappearing faster than they should. The unexplained drowsiness after Sunday dinners here at your place. The minor accidents that could have been major if I'd been less lucky or careful. David turned as white as a ghost. You're delusional, Margaret. That's absolutely ridiculous. But Emma was looking at me with growing horror in her eyes. David, what is she talking about? What pills? What have you been doing to my mother? David turned on her, enraged and defensive. I haven't been doing anything at all. Your mother is making things up because she's desperate and trying to make us look bad. Desperate. I repeated. No, David. You're the one who's desperate. And I think my daughter is starting to realize what kind of man you really are. At that moment, as if cued by fate itself, David's phone rang loudly. He glanced at it, and his expression changed dramatically. Aren't you going to answer? I asked with false sweetness. It might be important. David declined the call, but it immediately rang again insistently. Emma was watching him with growing suspicion. Who is it, David? Why won't you answer? It's no one important, he muttered, but the phone kept ringing insistently. Finally, Emma strode over and snatched the device from his hands. The screen clearly read Sarah, wife. Emma stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. Sarah. Wife, she whispered. David, what does this mean? David tried to grab the phone back, but she recoiled away from him. Answer it, she screamed. Answer it right now. With trembling, shaking hands, David accepted the call. Sarah, it's not a good time. A woman's voice came through clearly on. The kids are asking for their dad, and I'm sick of your excuses and lies. Emma dropped the phone as if it had burned her hand. The kids, she repeated in a hollow voice. She said the kids. David quickly ended the call, but it was too late. Emma, I can explain. It's not what you think at all. Not what I think. Emma shrieked with a fury I had never seen in her before. That you're married to another woman? That you have children with her? Technically, David stammered, my marriage to Sarah doesn't count because I married you after her. Technically? Emma was on the verge of hysterics. You're a bigamist. You're married to 2 women at the same time. David held up his hands, trying to calm her down. Emma, listen to me. Sarah and I, that's in the past. You are my real marriage, my real love. Liar, she screamed at him. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something akin to pity for my daughter. She had been his victim too. It's all been a lie. All of it. She turned to me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know anything about Sarah or the children. David looked at me with pleading eyes. Margaret, this changes things. Now that you know the truth about Sarah, surely you understand that I need to resolve this situation. The money from the apartment would help me. To what? I interrupted with disgust. To support 2 families? To keep lying to 2 different women? I stepped toward him until we were face to face. What I understand, David, is that you are worse than I thought. You're not just a con artist and a manipulator. You're a criminal. The phone rang again. She moved toward him menacingly. Making me wish for the death of the woman who gave me life? Sarah looked at Emma in shock. You wished for your mother's death? Emma covered her face with her hands, ashamed. David convinced me she was selfish for not helping us more. He made me believe she was being cheap, that she was denying us the chance at a better life. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Mom, I never really wanted you to die. I was frustrated. I was angry, but I never wanted. I know, I said softly. And I realized it was true. David manipulated Emma just as much as he manipulated me. He is very good at making people see what he wants them to see. Sarah nodded bitterly. He convinced me his other absences were for extra work. He convinced me he was doing everything for us, for our future. She looked at little Michael, who had fallen asleep in a chair. He convinced me having a second baby was a good idea because we'd have more money soon. David became completely desperate. All right. Yes, I lied to all of you, but it was necessary. I have huge debts. Dangerous people are looking for me. Finally, an honest confession. If I didn't get the money from the apartment, they were going to hurt me. They were going to kill me. Sarah turned pale. Dangerous people? David, what are you talking about? I owe money to loan sharks, okay? Not banks. People who don't take bounce checks for an excuse. David collapsed into a chair, all his arrogance gone. I thought if I got Mrs. Margaret's apartment, I could pay everything off and start over. He looked at me with pleading eyes. I just needed time to fix things. Fix things, I repeated in disbelief. David, you don't fix things by lying to 3 generations of women. You don't fix things by stealing from an old woman. You don't fix things by being a bigamist. Sarah approached him, holding Michael. And you definitely don't fix things by abandoning your children when they need you most. At that moment, David's phone rang again. This time he looked at the screen and turned green. Who is it now? Emma asked sarcastically. The third wife. David swallowed hard. It's one of the loan sharks. The phone continued to ring insistently. Sarah looked at me in terror. Mrs. Margaret, if those people come here, they're not coming here, I said firmly, making a decision I knew would change everything. Because we are calling the police right now. David shot to his feet when I mentioned the police. No, Margaret, you can't do that. If you call the police, those people will think I betrayed them. They'll kill me, and they might hurt Sarah and the kids too. Sarah clutched Michael tighter, who had woken up from the shouting. What kind of trouble have you brought into our lives, David? Her voice trembled with fear and rage. The kind of trouble you solve by facing it, not running from it, I said firmly, picking up my phone. But before I could dial, the door was thrown open violently. 3 men entered uninvited. I knew immediately these were the loan sharks David was so afraid of. The one who seemed to be the leader was a burly man with scars on his hands and eyes as cold as ice. David Thompson, the man said in a slow, threatening voice. You've been a hard man to find. David instinctively backed away, positioning himself behind Emma as if she were a shield. Mr. Vincent, I told you I'd have your money this week. I just need a little more time. Time? Vincent repeated with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We've been very patient with you, David. Too patient. Sarah moved closer to me with Michael in her arms, seeking protection. Please, she whispered. Don't let them hurt my son. I put an arm around her shoulder, trying to project a confidence I didn't fully feel. Vincent looked around the elegant apartment appreciatively. Nice place. Must be worth a good chunk of change. His eyes settled on me. You must be the mother-in-law David told us so much about. I'm Margaret, I said with all the dignity I could muster. And this is my daughter's apartment. You have no right to be here. Vincent laughed. Mrs. Margaret, your son-in-law owes us $150,000. That gives us some rights. He moved toward David, who was visibly trembling. He told us you were going to help him with the payment, that you had an apartment worth $200,000 and you were going to transfer it to him. David stared at the floor, unable to speak. Emma looked at him with a mixture of horror and contempt. You told them my mother was going to pay your debts? David nodded miserably. I thought I could convince her. I thought if we pressured her enough. You thought wrong, I interrupted. And now you've endangered your entire family with your lies. Vincent approached me, but not in a threatening way. It was more like a businessman assessing a situation. Mrs. Margaret, I understand you're not to blame for your son-in-law's stupid decisions. But the fact is he used your name and your property as collateral for his loans. That gives us a certain interest in this matter. That's not how the law works, I responded firmly. I never signed anything. I never authorized anything. David has no legal claim to my property. The law, Vincent repeated thoughtfully. Ma'am, we don't exactly operate by the traditional law. We operate by a different code. One of his men walked over to David and put a heavy hand on his shoulder. David flinched like a frightened animal. Please, he begged. Just give me one more week. I can get the money another way. David, Vincent said with exaggerated patience. We've been listening to the same song for 6 months. One more week, another plan, another chance. The chances are over. Sarah began to cry silently, pressing Michael against her chest. The little boy seemed to understand that something terrible was happening, even if he didn't know exactly what. It was then that I made a decision that surprised even myself. Mr. Vincent, I said in a clear voice, what if I could offer you a different solution? Everyone in the room looked at me in surprise. David lifted his head with renewed hope, but I didn't look at him. My focus was entirely on Vincent. What kind of solution? He asked with genuine curiosity. One that involves real justice, not just money, I replied. David doesn't just owe you money. He defrauded me. He deceived his wife. He abandoned his children. And he committed bigamy. What would you say if instead of chasing an innocent family for his debts, we turned him over to the proper authorities? Go on, ma'am. David is going to prison one way or another, I explained. Bigamy, fraud, attempted theft, those are serious felonies. In prison, he won't be able to pay his debts, but he also won't be able to keep lying and hurting people. In the meantime, I might consider a reasonable compensation for the damages he caused my family. How much? Vincent asked directly. $50,000, I said without flinching. It's not everything he owes you, but it's better than chasing a man who will probably never be able to pay you the full amount. David looked at me in horror. Margaret, you can't just turn me in like this. I'm your daughter's husband, ex-husband. Emma corrected sharply. It's an interesting proposal, Mrs. Margaret. But how do we know you'll hold up your end of the deal? I took out my phone and called my lawyer. Mr. Harrison, it's Margaret. I need you to come to this address immediately and bring a payment agreement. I also need you to call the police. I gave him the address and hung up. My lawyer will be here in 20 minutes, I announced. We can formalize the agreement legally, and then David can explain all of his crimes to the authorities. David completely deflated. Please, he begged, but he no longer knew who he was talking to. Please, there has to be another way. David, I said with a calm that surprised me. For 5 years, you had the chance to be honest. You had the chance to be a good husband to Emma, a good father to your children with Sarah, a good son-in-law to me. You chose to be a liar, a con man, and a manipulator. Now you have to face the consequences. Sarah went to him, still holding Michael. David, this is what's best for everyone. The children need stability, not a father who disappears and brings criminals into our lives. Emma nodded. Mom is right. It's time for you to face what you've done. David looked at them all in desperation, but there was no escape. He had built a web of lies so tangled that he had finally trapped himself. Vincent extended his hand to me. Mrs. Margaret, I believe we can do business. I shook his hand firmly. Mr. Vincent, I believe this is the only way for everyone to walk away from this situation with some dignity intact. David sank into a chair, utterly defeated. His kingdom of lies had come to an end, and now he would have to face the truth of what he had done. In the distance, I could hear the sirens of the police approaching. 3 months after that night that changed our lives forever, I was sitting at the corner bakery with Patricia, watching life pass by the window as we had our usual herbal tea. How's Emma? Patricia asked with the motherly concern she always had for my family. Better, I answered honestly. The divorce proceedings are almost finalized, and she's going to therapy to process everything that happened. David had been sentenced to 5 years in prison for bigamy, fraud, and multiple counts of theft. During the trial, even more lies had come to light. It turned out he had a third woman in another city, an older widow he had also been systematically stealing from. The judge had been particularly harsh, remarking that he had rarely seen a case of such calculated and ruthless manipulation, targeted specifically at vulnerable women. And Sarah? Patricia continued. I smiled genuinely for the first time in months. Sarah is doing well. I got her an excellent lawyer. Her marriage to David was annulled on grounds of fraud, and she received compensation from the state for being a victim of bigamy. Also, I paused, savoring what I was about to say. I offered her a job as the administrator for my new foundation. Patricia raised her eyebrows in curiosity. Your new foundation? I nodded with pride. The Margaret Foundation for the Protection of Elderly Women. I decided to use some of my money to help other women who have been victims of family-related fraud. Sarah turned out to be incredibly organized, and she has a real passion for helping others who have been through what she has. And Sarah's children? Michael and the baby are doing great. In fact, I stopped to take a sip of tea, enjoying the suspense. Sarah moved into the apartment downstairs from me. We had the space renovated to be perfect for a single mother with 2 young children. Michael calls me Grandma Margaret and helps me water the plants every day. Patricia's smile grew wider. Margaret, that's beautiful. You've turned something terrible into something positive. It was true. After David was arrested that night, I had expected to feel empty or devastated by my own daughter's betrayal. But instead, I had discovered an inner strength I didn't know I possessed. For decades, I had defined myself primarily as a mother, as a widow, as the gentle old woman in the neighborhood. Now, I saw myself as a survivor, a protector, a woman who was not going to let anyone else be victimized the way I almost was. You know, the most ironic part of all this, I said to Patricia, David thought I was a helpless old woman with a little bit of money saved up. He never actually investigated my finances properly. My husband had invested very wisely, and when he died, I continued those investments. Between the life insurance, the properties I own in other cities, and the investment accounts, I have nearly $2 million. Patricia nearly choked on her tea. Margaret, why did you never tell me? Because I never needed to tell anyone. But now that David tried to steal from me, I decided it was time to use that money for something more meaningful than just saving it. Hence the foundation. Patricia understood.
Exactly.
And that's why I could pay off the loan sharks without a problem. $50,000 to me is like $50 to most people. My phone buzzed, interrupting our conversation. It was Emma. Hi, Mom. Are you free this afternoon? I'd like to come visit if that's okay.
Her voice sounded different now.
More mature, more humble, but also more authentic. Of course, sweetheart. Is everything okay? Yes, Mom. I want to spend time with you. Real time. No lies, no hidden agendas. Just a daughter visiting her mother. I hung up with tears in my eyes. Patricia took my hand across the table. It's going to take time, she said softly. But I think you two are going to be okay. I know, I replied. Emma was a victim of David too. He manipulated her, made her believe I was selfish, that I wasn't supporting her enough. The therapists say it's common in cases of psychological abuse. The manipulator isolates the victim from their family support system. Have you forgiven her? Patricia asked directly. It was a difficult question. I'm in the process, I admitted. Part of me understands that she was also deceived, but another part of me is hurt by the fact that at some point she actually wished for my death. That's something that takes time to get over. But you love her, Patricia stated. I love her. I will always love her. But now I also love myself enough not to let anyone treat me poorly, not even my own daughter. We left the bakery and walked slowly toward my building. The neighborhood looked different now, brighter somehow. You know what I'm most proud of in all of this? I said to Patricia as we approached my door. It's not exposing David or saving my money or even starting the foundation. What is it then? It's discovering that at 65 years old, I can still completely reinvent myself. I can still be brave. I can still fight for what's right. That afternoon, when Emma came to visit, we sat in my renovated living room. I had taken down all the photographs of David and added new ones. Sarah with her children, me at the foundation's open. Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. He convinced me you were selfish for not giving us more money. He made me believe you were taking advantage of us emotionally. He was so convincing. Good manipulators always are, I told her. But Emma, I need you to understand something important. I will never again allow anyone to disrespect me, no matter who they are. I understand, Mom, and I accept that, she said. She approached me timidly. Do you think someday we can rebuild our relationship? I looked at her for a long moment. My daughter, who now looked older, wiser, but also more broken by everything that had happened. I think we can build a new relationship, I finally said. It won't be the same as it was before, because I'm not the same person I was, and neither are you. But it can be something better, something more honest. That night, after Emma had gone, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the city lights. My phone had several messages from Sarah sharing pictures of Michael on his first day at his new school. I also had a message from my lawyer confirming that 3 more women had reached out to the foundation seeking help after being defrauded by family members. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with myself. Not because my life was perfect, there was still pain, still wounds to heal, but because I finally understood my own worth. For decades, I had defined myself through my relationships to others. Wife, mother, mother-in-law. Now I knew myself as Margaret, a strong, intelligent, and independent woman who needed no one's approval to be whole. I raised my glass to the stars and made a silent toast. To endings that are really new beginnings. To discovering that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. And to learning that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. It means being free. I drank the wine slowly, savoring not just the liquid, but the sweet taste of justice and self-determination. The moon shone bright above the city, and I smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help others through my foundation, and new chances to build stronger, healthier relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. But tonight, I simply sat in peace, knowing that I had survived the storm and emerged stronger than ever before. The old woman they had dismissed so easily had proven to be far more resilient and resourceful than they could have ever imagined. And as I looked out at the twinkling lights of the city, I realized that my story wasn't ending, it was just beginning. At 65, I had discovered a new purpose, a new strength, and a new understanding of who I truly was. I was no longer just someone's mother or someone's widow. I was Margaret, and that was more than enough. The end.